everyone, and welcome to a special one-off podcast featuring Lucienne Miller from Ebb and Flow, a business created with the mission to change the way people manage their mental well-being. Lucienne's worked with numerous companies to really change the way they view mental health in the workplace, teaching on topics like neurodiversity, psychological safety, and mental fitness. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Meryl Manning, currently manager of learning and development at smart home technology company Ecobee. I'm working hard to become a psychotherapist at the Toronto Institute of Contemporary Psychoanalysis, following Lucienne's footsteps as she's just completed her master's degree in applied positive psychology. I think we graduate next week. Is that right, Lucy? Today we're going to be talking about mental health in the workplace. And so let's dive into our questions. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Hit me, Meryl.
Okay, so our first question. I think this is a nice, juicy one. What role do you think individuals play in prioritizing their own mental health, especially in like the technology industry? How can they effectively manage their well-being within the workplace?
I think that's such a loaded question, isn't it? Because we can say like, we all have autonomy and we all have the ability to regulate and look after our own well-being and a responsibility to look after our own well-being. But the way I just think it's such a muddy place to start, because sometimes looking after our well-being can only happen when we are aware of what's in our control. So if we look at the happiness split was this report, and it says genetically we are like say 40 to 50% genetic. 10% is with circumstance. Are we born into a war zone? Are we born with a disability that's life limiting? Anything else? But then the rest is within our control. But if we don't realize that there's like say 40 to 50% of our kind of well-being within our hands, it kind of compounds with the rest. So yes, we need to know that well-being is an individual priority, and then work on that and think, right, how can I kind of develop, learn and grow? But then I personally don't feel that an organization can put individuals in an environment that goes against everything they need to have good well-being and then be like, there you are, it's all on you, like you best sort yourself out. I feel as though the businesses of the future, they really, really need to be thinking very strategically about well-being and how they're promoting it and supporting it, because with everything in life is too fast, too soon, too hard, too everything at the minute. So people are getting more and more unwell. And bottom line, if a business doesn't care about its people, but it still wants to be profitable, you got to look after the people and help them facilitate their well-being, or otherwise you're screwed.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think that's like such a great point. Like, not everybody knows that they need the accommodations that they need, and so if we make it more about attributes, what do you want in your workplace, and we make it more flexible for everyone, then we sort of get rid of this whole idea that people need to manage their own well-being, and we just create environments where people can pick the things that work for them. I hadn't really thought of it like that. That it doesn't have to be, because otherwise we're relying on people to really self-reflect and really understand themselves. And obviously, my bias is that people should be doing that all the time. But it's like we don't always live in a place where everyone has the privilege of being able to speak to a therapist, or even like have the desire or know that they might want to speak to a therapist too. So I think that's really key. And so then,
Exactly.
yeah.
And you have to think as well, and this is what I always gets to me as well, is that when we're stuck in like permanent stress, like when we are like our head is like just completely consumed by deadlines, by workload, by family stress, by climate change, by everything, we're literally we're not designed to be in stress at all times. We lose the capacity to make good choices. If we're in poverty, if we feel like we're in danger, literally we cannot make a good decision. There's been so much research around it. And but the prefrontal cortex, executive functioning switches off. So you've got that then. You're stuck in the stress response. You can't respond. You're not going to make the best decisions. And therefore, you need to have an environment that allows for. Do you know what? I say an environment. Yes, the environment needs to be one that facilitates optimal well-being, but you cannot have a good environment that facilitates that unless you have got excellent leadership and culture, because it just becomes complete BS. That it has to come from the foundations in the fabric. Otherwise, you just got some toxic culture that is creating worse health, I would say.
Yeah, it really has to become a priority. And I think you're right. Like well being and mental health so often becomes a sort of like tick the box. What are we doing for health and well being? What are we doing to make sure the employees have the tools that they need? But it doesn't become like a fundamental part of what it is you're trying to do. It doesn't become part of your education. It doesn't become part of the conversation. It doesn't become part of like what are the strengths of the employees and what are the areas where we could support them more. Like if you made it fundamental and you truly started with the people to build a company and everybody was working at their best, you'd be unstoppable. So it's always a little bit frustrating that it feels that companies need to go slow to go quick, ultimately to slow down and really be able to talk to
Yes.
employees, and they just never do. Why do you think they don't
Literally.
do
I
it, Lucy?
literally Sorry, jumped on top of me then. But they don't do they? But literally, I was teaching management skills last week. And it was like like managers who like all different levels, and it was basically different sectors. And the one thing I kept saying to everyone was slow equals smooth and smooth equals fast. Like like the gift is in reducing speed, but we all want the future now. Like the dopamine lives there. You know, this is the way, this is what we've got to do. We've got to make change. We've got to like change the world, save the world, do all of this stuff. But it's like, for what? Because you're going to die early. Like, literally, we're going to just be exhausted, overworked, overwhelmed, and we're going to like just be completely burnt out. So, why would we? Slow equals smooth, smooth equals fast. I completely agree. But I feel as though when leadership and management, either they're from traditional organizational mythology. So they're looking at the production line version of business. Um, they've got that mindset. People must take control of their own autonomy and their own well-being. But when we have that, we kind of miss the trick of like how to support excellence within like and thriving within the organization. Um, so it's really getting leadership to understand that tactically, one human, let's just be decent. But then tactically, we have got to get everybody to slow down because we're not going to be able to get into the future unless we do so.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting too because I feel like with the remote world, there's almost like this secret where people are balancing their lives very effectively at home, but they're nervous to be honest about when they work and how they work and the breaks that they take and the way in which they get things done. Like we're all hitting the results that we need, but we're not really talking about, you know what, from 10:30 to 11, I just lay on my bed and had a moment to myself. And I think that there's this sort of expectation, even in the remote world, that we are like endlessly toiling and getting stuff done. And I think that if we were able to have more role models in those leadership roles, which were like, you know what, sometimes I spend the morning really stressed out and I'm thinking, and it's the afternoon when I really get my work done. Or there are days that I don't focus and days where I can really focus and get everything done. I think people would feel a bit more relaxed about being able to set the day and set the
Yes.
intentions that they want.
Yeah, or just for I absolutely agree with that, because we know when we're hybrid working as well, and we're sat, you know, we're working, we're living, we're doing everything from the same space. This really worries me. You know, I work like hybrid, but I worry about the long-term impact on mental health because we're designed for people. We're literally hardwired to need other humans, and we have removed ourselves. And whilst we do get interaction, I reckon it's so much less than we had before. But we're not meeting different types of people either. We're meeting people just like us who we really, really like, kind of a thing. We're not seeing outside of our echo chambers. We're not having the interactions that we really need. So I feel as though there's potential for mental health to pan, even if we have more balance. But we're also in the same environments that we live in. So kind of it's a little bit more stressful unless we're very tactical about how we like start our days, have our breaks, end our days. Um, and then if we feel as though, oh, well, I can't say what I've been up to, I've got to go on all these meetings that are pointless and there's no purpose to them. And I just feel as though I'm always being checked because now I'm online, they're checking me more and more and more. Like, it's tiring, isn't it? So I think if leaders do set the tone and they do say, like, do you know what, this meeting, I don't know, I just feel like it's pointless, like, let's all go. Or if a leader like logged on and was like, guys, can we all have cameras on just for 5 minutes? Like, I just really want to talk to you and actually see you for once for 5 minutes, because I've noticed that we're going into meetings now, the more we kind of get used to it, and nobody ever has a camera on. And I just feel as though it gives so much stress, it desensitizes, it removes us from the other human as a human. And we might think, yeah, brilliant, I can kind of crack on, but we also lose a lot of the well-being magic that we have from connection. Um, Sorry, that was a real tangent, Meryl. Not
No,
not even the point that we were on about.
no, I agree with it. Again, it's like, oh, I agree with everything you say, so I'm going to be careful about just saying I agree with you. But I think it's it's really sparked something in me, because I do think that there's some flexibility in being able to say to people, if you want to have your camera on, have your camera on. If you want to have it off, you have it off. But I know that there are times when I'm in meetings and I can see everyone and I'm looking at people's reactions, that it really does have a huge impact. And so I think this idea of like, just turn them on for 5 minutes so we can all look at each other, because like we want the connection, and then being able to then give people space to turn their camera off too. I know that sounds like a really small change, but it's almost like that admitting to what
It's
we need.
massive.
Yeah, it's like, it's almost like people are nervous to ask for something because they're not really sure. We're not having these conversations about what people need and how their balance is. Like, I've never said to anyone, how's your balance for connection this week? I've just said to people, I think we should have our cameras on so we can all look at each other. Like, I think the conversation could be bigger. And so it's difficult to know what the balance is, letting people do what they want.
Yeah, but if it sounds like a really ridiculous conversation to have, doesn't it? But actually, like, it's very helpful to know these things. But this, so like going back to that training I was teaching last week, and we were on about hybrids, and everyone was like, I'm exhausted, I'm busy. Like, there were lots of people that were in like, oh, really like hardcore sectors, like they made like spaceships and things like that. It was like super busy, super stressful. And they were like, I'm so overwhelmed by these meetings and the way that they're ran. And I was like, has anybody asked why the meetings have been ran? Has anybody asked why they're needed? Has anybody asked about, like, and they were like, well, no, we just assume that, that's it. I said, but if everybody's making an assumption about how something should be, like, it's always going to continue that way. And everybody might just be sat there feeling the same stresses and the same overwhelm, but nobody's speaking up. One person asks the question, and you either find out the reason, or you kind of create a new status quo. You break an outdated system and method of doing something and create something practical and useful. And that can be as much as like, do you know what? I really need to see people today. Can we just have 2 minutes? I get it. If there's 50 of you in a call, it's not going to work. But like, if there's just a few of you having a session, like, you wouldn't sit in a room with your back towards everybody.
No, we
Like,
would.
and you know me, Meryl. We've worked together. You know, I'm always like, cameras on, cameras off, whatever it is you need. But everybody tends to leave them on. And I think, yeah, like, it sounds so small, doesn't it, when it comes to well-being? But it's like, it's bringing us back together. And the way I see it is, in an organization, we've got traditional business over here, and traditional business is like dying. It's dead. People are like little cogs in a machine, and you're dispendable. Like, organizations, massive ones, may still want that because that's what they're built on. Those foundations worked for that time. But we've now got people coming into the workforce who do not want to fit into that old methodology. They want something new. So at the minute, what we're trying to do, even modern business, even organizations that are really cutting edge, really like future focused, because they don't have often, individuals in there that kind of have looked or worked in the different spaces potentially, like, they're still using some of the old patterns within the way they run the business, because that's kind of what we know. That's the foundation upon which businesses are built. And so we're trying to get like this new world to fit into an outdated organization and an outdated system. Like what we need to realize is that we need to be taking some of the key bits, but actually burning that when it comes to like productivity, people, how we do things, and creating something completely new. Like business point four, this idea of organizations as organisms, and we all have this like this role to play within that, and it's really fluid. And that is where we have to put humans front and center. And that's where it is like, how are we connecting? How are we seeing each other? How are we having a good conversation? Are we being really thoughtful about our spaces? Are we looking at the way we tactically bloody manage our diary? It sounds ridiculous, but you know, do our diaries like, and the boss has to do that. The leader, the manager is always got to be the one who's like, do you know what, I've looked through your calendar and it is rammed with meetings, this is just insane. Like I want to see it in there that you have got a break that is for, I don't know, whatever it may be. And leading by example, like there's so many different things that you could do, but it has to switch around and the person has got to come to the fore. But we haven't done that before. This is new. So we're still like trying to conform to the old way and do things with that old mindset, if that makes sense. Where we need people to be like, hang on, like why? Like, why are we still destroying ourselves, overworking ourselves, breaking ourselves? In this way when we know that it is ineffective. I'm not going to have loyalty to the organization. Trust is going to break down. My productivity is going to go, and I'm going to spend my whole day on like Daily Mail online or some like nonsense online. Like, yeah, it's a whole conversation in a shift, isn't it? Sorry, another tangent, Meryl. That was so many thoughts in one.
No, they all fit together nicely. I really think to me, like what it sparks is this conversation around the 4-day work week too. And so it's interesting because you want to combine flexibility. I really feel like this conversation is interesting because ultimately you should start with like, what do I need? What do I want? What's working well? How can we do things at a manageable speed so that we're not like dropping people off the train as we like speed through? So it's sort of a long-term thinking. But in technology, it's like build, 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 get the product out, try it out, like get it in trial, see what people think about it. And so there is a bit of a like a tussle between those two concepts, even though we know from things like the 4-day work week that when we give people more time to rest and like consolidate information and take time for themselves and like live these very full lives, that the productivity numbers are a lot higher. And so, like, do you think it's just like the old guard, like having a hard time moving into this new world? Or is there like some other holdup that's stopping people from really breaking through to the other side of like, let's rearrange our whole lives to make work make more sense for us?
Like, there's a few things that jump into my mind when you say that. And I'm like, okay, yes, when we look at tech, it is just, it's rapid, isn't it? You've got to be adaptable. You've got to be flexible. You've got to keep moving. Um, I would be thinking, are we well resourced? Like, I know again, this is you're trying to get budget to meet everything, but are we a well resourced team? If resources is difficult, we can't have the staff numbers that we need. We can't have like everything that we need. I would be thinking as a manager, I'd be like, right, everybody is burning. Like we're pushing and we want that. We've hired people within a role as well who thrive in these environments. So we know they're going to get it, like it's going to be good for them in a way. But what we want to do is create this kind of psychologically safe space that if they feel as though they're getting to burnout, if it's getting too much, there's no shame and then be like, do you know what? I need a hard pass, like just for whatever it is, like because we want them to be able to recognize when they need to step back for a small time so that they don't fall off a cliff 2 weeks later, because then we're going to have loads of issues with like further absenteeism, presenteeism, jumping ship. Or how am I ensuring tactical downtime on the completion of a project? How am I really supporting my team and celebrating the victories? Or are they just all merging into one? Like, I'd be looking at it like a seasonal trend. I'd be like, right, this is a product launch, this is this, this is this. So I'm going to have loads of work here. And then I'm going to see a big spike in resources, people, energy, that kind of stuff. I'm going to probably see maybe an increase in absenteeism, presenteeism here. This is going to then drop off a little bit. We're going to have a really big push again. There's going to be lots of stress, but then this is D-Day. We're done. So right after this, before that, I'm going to be plugging in what I can to try and give people the resources that they need to be effective. And then I'm going to really put in anchor points like, are we having a real celebration that doesn't involve just getting hammered on completion of the project? Am I having my team physically meet before a big project pushes so that they can talk, they can look at strengths, they can be working together as much as they can? And then can I tactically once or twice, say if it was a 6-month lead time, can I have like 2 mornings where I am going in and I'm working with that team? And we're doing something as a team all together, a community that isn't about the work, but it's going to help, like, just, open the, like, let the steam out a little bit. Like, that's in my brain, that's what I would want to do as a manager, as a leader. I'd be like, how am I tactically hitting this for everything, for well-being? Within the office, I'd be like, okay, if we're not physically working and we've got stuff to do, are we having like walking meetings? Are we like out in nature? Are we thinking strategically about having a break and doing something? If you can hear a child, by the way, there's a rogue one who might come into the room. There we go. Door handle's moving. Yeah, that's what I think. Like, if we
Yeah.
can't stop the pressure, how do we regulate the pressure?
Yeah, I honestly think it's such a human way to look at it. When you describe it and really like thinking about people more holistically and your team more holistically, it just makes so much sense. I guess I'm curious as to how it just seems so obvious when you say it, and then it almost like the minute you step away from it, it sort of gets lost in the ethos of everything that has to get done. Like, how did you get to the point where you recognize that, like, being holistic in the way that you look at your team and being smart in the way that you create those like releases of pressure and those times of connection, like, what brought you to those conclusions, and why do you think it's like been so difficult for other people to kind of bring that into the work that they do?
Because, well, I think for me, I think the reason that I look at it that way is like, we've had this conversation. I used to teach business for years and years and years. And I have OCD, and it was really, really prolific when I was at work. It was like limited and impacted everything. I gritted it out. I went to work every day. I did a good job, but it was just awful. And when I'd speak to my boss, I'd be like, tell him how it was, and he'd be like, oh, do you know what, Lou? Like, you've got a job. If you can't do it, then like there's the door. And I was like asking for support. I wasn't saying I couldn't do it. Like, I was crushing it. I was turning up every day. I didn't have to. Like, he didn't see the value in supporting a staff member. Like, he should have looked at me and been like, she is incredible. Like, she is in such a bad, like, I couldn't drink water. I was worried, like, contamination OCD. Like, what if something touches my food? What if something's in the air? Like, panic attacks like 3-4 times a day. And I'd still go and teach like 30 people who maybe had just left prison. And I'd still be teaching them like mid panic attacks. Literally, I'd go to the toilet. Then my mate, like the PA, would come in and she'd be like, "Go, you're okay, breathe." And I'd go in and I'd carry on delivering, and then I'd feel another huge panic attack. I'd go out and like I'd do all of this. I'd go home, and then I wouldn't be able to like leave the house. Like it was, I was a mess. But my boss, even knowing this, wasn't like, oh my goodness, like look at the strength she has to come in and do a job and mask so well that nobody knows. Why aren't I facilitating her well-being? And in the end, I lost trust for the
Yeah.
organization, and I just started to like just skive, sit Google this, because I thought, why bother for you? Like, there's no point. So, like, firsthand, I knew the stress of having like OCD and poor mental health in the workplace and how it impacted my work. Imagine how well I would have done if
Yeah.
I'd been given the right conditions to thrive. Like, I would have crushed it, like you wouldn't believe. And I'd have enjoyed it. And as a manager, if you don't like your manager, you are 30% more likely to develop heart disease than people who have a good relationship.
It's true.
That's outstanding. Like, we should all be like, we have a moral duty to do our best for those around us, because we literally add health and years to their lives. And so, like, from that starting point of having been somebody struggling, I was always like, well, it makes sense to me to like look at a seasonal trend. What are our pain points? Because we all have them operationally. And I suppose that's from teaching business. Why aren't we looking at what's going to put lots of stress on an organization, on the people, the hearts? And why aren't we then like trying to be human? Like, okay, what's stopping me from being human? What would have improved my well-being? Oh, my boss saying, "Oh, Lucy, that sounds really hard. Like, how
Mm.
can I help?" Or, "Do you know what, Lou? Just come and talk to me. Every time it feels this much, come and speak to me." Or, "Just go and have half an hour to go and walk outside, Lucy." Oh God, hearts and minds, I'd have done anything. But instead, I used to get laughed at. They talk behind my back. Like, HR were just awful. Like, they were just horrendous. Like public shaming. Um, and so I just thought this is just a better way to do business. And so that's why I think about it. And obviously, the more like my masters and all of that is particularly looking at the neuroscience of well-being, positive organizational psychology. And I just think it makes sense to like, if we know how the nervous system acts, if we can be trying to regulate that through how we stagger our day, how we talk to people, how we strategically think about spaces, then we're going to see an improvement, because we're working in line with how our body and our brain works instead of against it, which is what traditional business does. So,
Yeah.
and we can see it, you know, for every pound you spend on preemptive well-being support in an organization, there's a £9 return on that investment through an increase in productivity and a reduction in absenteeism and presenteeism. Like, it works.
It's like your 9 times return. I wonder too. I wonder too if some of the holdup, because I think that that's where what comes in. It's like we know that if we just put our hand out and we say like, "I'm sorry that you're going through that. Like, how can I help? How can I make this space better for you?" We know in the long run that it's going to work. But I think there's an element of resentment. I think people who are, I think everybody's struggling. I think there are some blessed people walking around the world happy in their secure attachment, living an easy life. But I think most of us are struggling. And so there's this element of like, I'm struggling, but I'm, pushing through. I'm struggling, but I'm not asking for accommodations. And so then when someone comes along who's more self aware and has done the self reflection and maybe done some work and is able to ask for what they want, I feel like there's a sort of like underlying resentment that gets built up of like, why are you not just struggling through life and like accepting how hard everything is? So I wonder if there's like an element of empathy that needs to happen, or if it's just that we need to provide more self-reflection for everyone. Any thoughts on how we can sort of bridge that gap between this like, oh, everybody struggles, you just have to push all your feelings down and keep going, and the cohort who's like, no, I'm not doing things the same way they were ever done before, like it has to work for me?
Great question, Meryl. I think, yeah, we definitely have different levels of consciousness according to where we are in our lives. Um, I always try to approach everybody with, we're all doing the best we can with the information that we have at the time. People don't choose to, like, when we're angry, when we're upset, there's a reason for that, isn't there? That's coming from a place of whatever that may be. And that can be difficult. And I think if it was me and if I was a manager, like, because I really think one well-being is in individual well-being is in our hands, is in we can like exercise, eat well, meditate, be in nature, have great friends, follow perma, all of those things. Within an organization and within my own team, I want to always be very authentic so that everybody knows who I am and what I stand for. And then I will always say, "And what do you need from me?" Like, because somebody might not want, like you've just said, somebody might not want all of like the bells and whistles and all of that. They might just want to check in, check out, and that's them. Fine. absolutely fine. Like, and I will ask you that, and I will say, like, how do you want to be led? How do you want to be managed? How can I support you? And if they're like, I just want to be left alone, I'll be like, okay, from my perspective, I'm going to have some check-ins with you, but they will look like this. I expect you to ask me when you need resource. I'll try and have a conversation. We don't have the two-way conversations. Like, we tick the box instead of asking the human what they need. And then this idea that if we're in a space where or the way I see it is, if I will try and follow the lead of the people around me, and I will also and have a hard boundary. So we know what excellent behavior is. We know what, like, you're out of here behavior is. But I really try hard to have an authentic and psychologically safe space within my team. Like, I see it as like we're a community, so that people can go on their own journeys and evolve, and all of whatever it could be. And they know that they know how I've butchered that. They know how the space lies, and when they can come to me if they want more, want less. There's not going to be judgment. There's just going to be, okay, how do we facilitate you? How do we make sure that job gets done?
Yeah, totally. It's like it may be that everything's fine in that moment, and then things get tough, and they still have that psychological safety to come back and ask for any accommodation that they need. I think it is also partially modeling behavior too. I think you have to expect
Entirely.
openness and honesty. You really have to be open and honest, which in itself takes a lot of self reflection too. When you step into that people management role, you're expecting to be looking after other people's careers and doing like performance reviews, which is all stuff that you do, but you forget that like now you're going to have to model the behavior that you're looking for. You're going to have to like dive deep into what you need and what you're like getting from your manager, and sort of be able to make sure you're satisfied, so that that sort of like put the air mask on in the airplane before you do the children. It's like you kind of have to like get yourself to a point where you are able to manage others too. And there's quite a lot of responsibility to manage people. And I think, it comes with a
Yeah.
pay bump, but I think people think of it as their own career development instead of really like a sort of a new depth, a new skill. And again, we send people off to learn how to give feedback and like how to have conversations, and really like all of the skills that come naturally. But I think they're missing the skills of like how to create that psychological safety, how to deal with different types of employees, how to create the community, like as you so beautifully put it. I think Ebb and Flow like does exactly that. Like that's really like the niche that you're in. So is it something that you always saw a need for, or have you had to really spend a lot of time explaining to people like why these are the skills that people should be really learning?
Oh, like, yeah, you definitely have to, like, I always say you've got the yay sayers and the naysayers. And like and there's no beef either way. But the yay sayers are like, yes, I completely see this. There's a demand for it. And then the naysayers, they're just a traditional business methodology. Like, you're just more old school. Like, you just rock up, you get stuff done, end of story. And yeah, like, you do need grit. You do need to, like, you do need to do your job. You do need to get stuff done. You do need to have hard boundaries, I personally believe. But I do think that we can still do a good job, work hard, work under pressure, and have boundaries, and still be decent humans and support other people. Like, so there's definitely still a lot more people that see it as a nice to have. They don't see it tactically. They're like, oh, I'll have that later. I'll try and work on that later. But now I've got to get this done. And they don't realize that they're putting what's that saying, the cart before the horse? Like, flip it. Because we don't live like 50 years ago. Like, we live in the world of AI. We live in the world of fast tech. Now, we know jobs are being made redundant left, right, and center. So we need our people to be excellent thinkers. We need our people to be able to understand empathy and how it leads to compassion. Like, these are the skills that are going to set us apart and keep us going in business. It is a tactical, that's the way I sell it. Like, I'm in it for the human and for the greater good. But we sometimes we have to sell it. It's a tactical business decision to be more human. Like, and then I think when you get that, that can get you into a door. And then all of a sudden we're able to have these conversations about what is well-being, what is performance, like, what is morally the right thing to do. And managers, um most managers and leaders aren't taught any of it. You've just said, we as we go along, we might be taught how to give feedback, we might be taught how to do like little bits of it, but nobody's suddenly told that actually no more. Like, you were an expert at your job, you were so good that we've promoted you, and now we don't want you to do your job anymore. We want you to manage other people, but we've never taught you how to manage people. We've never taught you how to interact with people who have got like different brains, different backgrounds, different skill sets. So like, crack on, get that done. Like, whoosh. That is so overwhelming. So I feel as though, like, even from that perspective, and I just think, and I've said this to you so many times, Meryl. It sounds so hippie, but it really gets to me. Is that we're literally made of stardust. Like, we are on this planet for the smallest amount of time. Our whole existence is a miracle. And I know personally, for me, like, I don't want to be anything but who I am in my workplace. I don't want there to be like, this is mom, this is work Lucy, this is academic Lucy. I want there just to be, right, this is Lucy, this is how she presents, this is who she is, like, this is her ethic, this, I know how to behave in different environments, but I'm not going to hide who I am. For those around me. And that's what I want to have. But that takes nuance, that takes skill, that takes great conversations, communications, understanding our belief system. Why? What's holding me back? What's the belief that's stopping me? Oh, I'm upset with you. Like, why? What is the belief that has made me worry about the way you've just spoke to me? How is that impacting the way I now speak to you? Do you know what I mean? These nuances. Like, and I think if we decide to go into a leadership position, we have to be willing to accept that we have to work on our personal growth and development as much as we do everything else, because we are people managers, not work managers. We should be the stupidest person in that room. I hate the word stupid, but we should always be like, everybody else should be the expert. We're there to support the team, everybody, and allow them to thrive in their roles. We need to be able to oversee it and keep everybody healthy and going. Yeah.
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 No, I agree. And I think that there's also a missing piece with like how we evaluate success. Like, or there's always going to be the metrics of success where we think about like, oh, did we get the product out? Like, did we meet the goals that we set for ourselves at the beginning of the year? But we rarely measure ourselves on like, did I manage to create balance? Did I not burn out any of my employees this month? Did I have people stay? Did I have people rate as being happy? And we do have engagement metrics at Ecobee. I think we do this pretty well. We have a good chunk of people in the HR team too, which really helps. But I think it's like how we evaluate our lives in general has been so focused on productivity and getting stuff done and like getting a title and like updating your LinkedIn. And I think that when we start to, I think it's always the case that when people are on their deathbeds, they're never like, oh, I wish I'd worked harder. I wish I'd spent more time in the office. They're always like, I wish I'd explored more. I wish I'd spent more time with my family. I wish I had told people that I love them. And so it's so interesting that we can't sort of work backwards. It's almost like time travel where we should be able to say, okay, I'm going to go back in time and do things differently. So I think sometimes the way we evaluate success and how we look, how we show off success, even if we think about social media, which is its own problem, but we are endlessly showcasing these accolades of things that we believe are successful. And like deep down, and we like, is this success? Is this making me happy? Like, you need to reflect too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, success is BS. Like, in the, success is in, this is what society tells me that success is. Like, oh no, the people pleasing. That's all that's happening. We are people pleasing. And wouldn't it be great, as you were saying that, when we're on our deathbed and we're like, I wish I'd have spent more time with people I love. And I know that this might be completely just, come on, Lucy, eye rolling, but wouldn't it be incredible if, regardless of the role, we could find our meaning and our purpose within our work, to be like, I adored being able to like make a difference. I adored, like, for me as a leader, the thought of being able to create a space where people were proud and they had, they felt connected. So that on their deathbed, it wasn't like, I wish I'd worked less. It was like, that enriched me, you know? Like, the connections, the communities, the experiences. Like, I know it's not so easy, like, when we're like in the trenches. But I do believe we have that capacity to make, and it's not huge. I don't believe that it might be a monumental belief shift, but I do believe it's in the small actions. Every time I email somebody, I want them to feel that I've thought about them. I have thought about when I email you, I'm emailing Meryl. I email you in a certain way with my personality. Like, I always like to leave people feeling good in my emails as well, like tiny little micro moments of connection. Like, that it builds and it grows. And when one person does it, it has a ripple effect. And it has a ripple effect. And so why do we have to have work as this demonized space? Why can't we revolutionize it and make it something that we're never going to be able to manage somebody's well-being, like, as in, that is somebody's, that they have got to like work with and have, support and all of that kind of stuff. But if I can, within my space, my control and my environment, facilitate a space for you to thrive, then I've done a good job. And that doesn't mean massive shifts. Even you're on about appraisals, like, move it. Don't have yearly appraisals. Break them down. Like, what's the point in a yearly appraisal? There's no point. Like, looking at the way we give feedback, the way that we respond to individuals, the way we work together, like, to co-create a solution instead of telling somebody what that solution should be, Yeah. There's so much that you can do that is just little.
Yeah, I also, I'll often remind our managers, like, I think we're sort of waiting for a lot of top-down initiatives. And I think that, like, if you're in a good company, that what they're allowing for you is the autonomy to run the team the best way you can. And so there are going to be some things that you have to, we always do OKRs at Ecobee. It's going to be a way we measure goals, but how you get your team to success really is up to you as a manager. I think sometimes this like nervousness to break like tradition and do things differently really sort of
Yes.
haunts people. Any thoughts on your end on how you can sort of like, feel free to do that and not be worried that like the hammer of, corporate world will come down on your head?
And that's a really excellent kind of insight there, really, Meryl. That's it. So itchy Meryl. That's it, isn't it? It's that unhelpful belief anchored in the traditional business. Like, oh, like, what if this is a trap? I feel as though I know the old ways, they're safe. Like, I want to do the new. Well, start small, start in a tiny way. Like, as an organization, like, give your team what they need. Like, let them go on strengths training. Let them do work around their beliefs. Like, give them that training so that they can begin to recognize what's holding them back. Help them more with their communication skills. Like, and say, look, and have somebody say, we are giving you this because we really want you to make this something personal, like the way you lead personal, based on our organizational values. Like, I might not be able to do the training with you, I might not be there, but this is it. This is the gift. And I'm so excited to see what you achieve. And if you feel uncomfortable, let's co-create this together. Like, you tell, what does good look like? Let's let's like plan it out, and then you can go and run with it. Like, everybody feels like they have to be the expert, but it's bullshit. Like, everybody then acts in fear. Like, we all just need to, like, let's collaborate, I think.
Yeah, I definitely have that bias too, that if we all were able to be safe enough to really talk about like what's actually going on with us, that we would like move ahead so much quicker. But it is, it is small bit at a time to really get there. I guess because we're coming up on an hour, I like want to ask you one final question. I'll get your thoughts on one final topic really, which is around that self-reflection and self-awareness. Like, what are your thoughts on getting therapy or like entering into courses around applied psychology? Is it every single person that needs to do it? Is it a fundamental shift in how we teach like children at school? Like, what is the future of well-being and mental health? Is it everyone, or is it just for those that need it? Like, what are your thoughts?
Excellent question, Meryl. And, like, I'm not a psychologist. So the kind of what I say is coming from my experience and my perspective and the evolution of me. I just know that education is power. So I'm not saying every single person on this planet needs to do something. Nobody needs to do something. But to be curious, to see the world in training with a curious eye is very useful, because it might just enhance. It might not be life changing for you, but it might enhance different elements of things that you're struggling with, or allow you to gain a deeper understanding on something. When we look at, like, I love therapy, I love coaching, I love psychological education. I feel like I had, I am not, it is not me. It is something that I've evolved with. It sounds like utter BS, but that's kind of it. Like with my mental health, like I think if I had been educated on the stress response, how the brain works, like the neuroscience of well-being, things I know now, well, my life would have been different. Um, because knowledge is power. And when we understand how we work, it takes the fear away. I personally believe, like, from my, my own anxieties, depressions, and OCDs, and now I see them all as a superpower, instead of like something that's kind of destroying my life. Like I can know how to harness them and give myself grace. So personally, I'm a massive advocate of personal development, because nobody wants to stay stuck. Everybody can say there's one area in their life they would like to improve: their relationships with their parents, their dogs, their spouses, their friends. They might want to progress better at work, or get over an illness easier. Sometimes that can come through formal or informal personal development. I really feel as though, like, I teach resilience and psychological fitness for children through a UK charity, Bounce Forward, and we do it for the military. I personally feel like, well, it's been so heavily researched that we should be completely changing the way that we look at well-being in the education system, and the way in which we deliver psychological support to our children, and empower them through education. Like, this is how you work. This is what emotional regulation is. This is how we um, look after your well-being, because we're in a world of fast tech. We're hyper connected. There's lots of scary things everywhere, and our brains aren't developed. Our brains haven't developed as fast as we have progressed. So we're in this kind of really messy middle of, how do we balance our well-being and our development? And so I think education is that. Um, and if it allows me to be basically, the way I see it is, for me, personal development means that I might have the opportunity to support somebody else not feel the horrors that I felt. We all got our own journey, and we're all going to have our own negative experiences, and like, we need them. But if I can, like, soften that blow slightly when it's unnecessary, then I'm good for that, for sure.
Yeah, I'm still on the same page with that. I think sort of my foray into like psychotherapy for myself, I just love the journey. And you're right, like it really is about understanding yourself better. But I do often, when I sort of have a bit of a breakthrough, feel sad for myself that I didn't have this information earlier. And I think that is something that drives me too. This idea that, like, if we could give people some of this self compassion, for lack of a better word, earlier, and just like this understanding that there is no right or wrong way to be, and there is no like success
Yes.
metrics that make sense for everyone, that we could create like such a kinder and more gentle world where we could be a lot happier, and it's almost like we are in our own way. So I really think that that's like such a beautiful sentiment, and I agree with it fully.
Yeah, and I bet you love it on your with your studies as well. And I feel like, even if the only thing that you learn is that, or find, and it's not the only, it's make it sound small, is that you just said, then it gives you this insight, and it makes you feel sad about like what had been. Like, I kind of got to this point, like, similar, like, I look back now on like old Lucy, because, like, obviously I've evolved. So there's so many versions of me that have died to get me to today, who I'm not perfect whatsoever. I still struggle. I have OCD days, severe anxiety days, all of that kind of stuff. Um, but now when I look back, and this is what personal development and learning how to be kind to myself has done, is, one, it's taught me that kindness is strength, it's not weakness. Because it takes vulnerability and bravery and effort. it's made me realize where before I used to look back and hate myself a little bit, like I can't, like, just you should be this robot. Now I'm able to look back with the reflection and be like, oh, like I just want to hug you, like 18-year-old Lucy, and tell you how proud I am of you and how brave you are. And if only you could see how strong you are to go through what you were going through, like you'd be blown away. And to be able to have that shift, that for myself, to go through empathy and compassion for myself is, yeah, it's outstanding. And that has to come from a choice to be vulnerable and, yeah, do things like this.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, what a beautiful note to end the podcast on, because I really do think that if there's a tip to take away from this, it really is through self-discovery, through self-compassion, and just really like learning what you can about the world around you. I think we're all very curious creatures by nature, and so really keeping that going is so key. But a huge thank you to Lucy for all of your wonderful insights and your wisdom. A big thank you to all of those of you who are listening to us, who are still listening all the way to the end. If there are any other topics that you want to hear about, please let us know. But hopefully, we'll see you at another podcast at another time soon.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me, Meryl. You were a gift as always. Awesome. Peace.